Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt journeys and powerful lessons from real-life experiences. In today's story, we delve into the life of a woman who faced exclusion and emotional pain from her own family, as they left her out of every significant moment. But through resilience and courage, she made a bold decision that changed her life forever. This story is about standing up for yourself, breaking free from toxic patterns, and choosing love and respect over obligation. So, sit back and join us as we share this inspiring journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start today's story. Growing up in a large family meant that there was always something happening, someone getting married, someone having kids, and, of course, the constant buzz of family gatherings. I had 4 older siblings: Ethan, Ryan, Olivia, and Sophia. To most people, having siblings is a blessing. And I suppose it is. But for me, it often felt more like a constant reminder of my place, or rather, my lack of place, within our family. I suppose the beginning of my pain came when Ethan, my oldest brother, got married. I was only 10 at the time, and I still remember how excited I was. I thought, surely, as their sister, I'd be included in such a monumental day. I was wrong. Ethan and his bride decided to have a child-free wedding, and that meant I was left out. It didn't make sense to me back then. After all, I was his sister, wasn't I? And yet, I found myself on the outside, looking in, while everyone else attended the celebration. At 10, I could understand the concept of a child-free wedding. I understood that maybe, just maybe, they wanted a more sophisticated and quiet event without the disruptions that children sometimes bring. But understanding didn't stop the hurt. I remember walking into the house the day after his wedding, feeling a knot in my stomach. Everyone was happy, everyone was talking about how beautiful it was. And I was just not there. I wasn't part of it. Years passed, but the pattern never changed. Ryan, my second oldest brother, got married when I was 12. Again, no invitation for me. By then, I'd learned to swallow my feelings. But it didn't get any easier. I was still their little sister. But I felt invisible, as though I didn't matter. The wedding was grand, and Ryan's bride was lovely. But I wasn't allowed to be a part of it. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about family. It was about an image. About maintaining a certain, adult, aesthetic. And that's when I began to feel it in my bones. It wasn't just about weddings. It was about my place in the family. When Olivia, my only sister, got married at 15, I thought there might be a chance for me. After all, I was older now. Surely, by 15, I wasn't the same little girl who had been excluded from the weddings before. Olivia was initially resistant to the idea of a child-free wedding. But as always, the family pushed her to go in that direction. It was easier that way. They said, it wouldn't be fair to the other children. They said, so, once again, I was left behind. I pleaded with Olivia, asking her to make an exception for me. I was 15, I argued, I wasn't a child anymore. But she refused, and I felt a wave of disappointment flood over me. She said it wouldn't be fair to the other children. As if fairness had ever mattered when it came to me. In a fit of frustration, I yelled at her, saying that it wasn't fair that I had never been invited to any of my siblings' weddings. That it wasn't fair that I had been left out every single time. But my anger was met with silence. And my parents grounded me for 6 months. I didn't care. I was angry. And I was hurt. I was growing up in a world where my family seemed to forget that I existed. Except when they needed something. It was always about everyone else. And I was always expected to just accept it. I could feel the resentment growing inside of me. And I didn't know what to do with it. By the time Sophia, my youngest sibling, got married when I was 17, I had resigned myself to the reality that I would never be included. I didn't even bother asking about the wedding. I knew it would be another child-free event. It had become a foregone conclusion by then. I didn't care anymore. I didn't ask. I didn't cry about it. I just sent a simple text message to congratulate her and ignored everything else. My cousin, who had just turned 18, was invited, but I was not. At this point, I had grown numb. I knew the routine. I knew what would happen. And when my parents got upset because I didn't congratulate them properly, I just shut down. I didn't argue. I didn't care to explain myself. I spent the rest of that day in my room with my fiancé, David. I had found someone who truly saw me. He was the only one who truly understood the pain I was feeling. He never judged me, never told me to get over it, like everyone else had. He let me feel my feelings. He was my solace. David was the person who made me feel like I mattered. He made me realize that I wasn't crazy for wanting to be treated like I mattered by my own family. But there was a part of me that still longed for the approval of my family. I didn't want to be the one who wasn't invited. The one who was left behind. The one who was never considered important enough. But by then, I had learned that love and validation from people who didn't see me for who I was didn't matter. The love I needed was from someone who understood me, who respected me, who cared about me for who I was, not for what they needed from me. Little did I know that this pattern of exclusion, this feeling of never being good enough, would change everything when it came to my own wedding. But that was still a long way away. When the day finally came for me to get married, something inside me clicked. I was determined that this day would be different from the weddings I had attended, or rather, the weddings I hadn't been allowed to attend. I wasn't going to allow my siblings to walk all over me anymore, to take me for granted like they always had. This was my moment, and for the first time in my life, I was going to have the power to choose who would be a part of it. And so, I decided. I wasn't inviting them. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Part of me still felt the pull of familial obligation. I grew up in a family where there was always pressure to conform, to put others before yourself, even if it meant sacrificing your own happiness. And so, I understood what it meant to be loyal, to care about family. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that loyalty and love should go both ways. They should not be conditional, nor should they be used as tools to manipulate. I had spent my entire childhood and adolescence feeling invisible, feeling excluded from all the special moments of my siblings' lives. I had begged, cried, and hoped to be included. But my requests had been dismissed time and again. And as I stood on the brink of my own wedding, I realized something profound. I had been treated as if I didn't matter. I had been invisible to them when it was important to me. So why should I bend over backwards to include them in something that was important to me now? So, I made the decision. Ethan, Ryan, Olivia, and Sophia weren't going to be at my wedding. It was my day, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it with their silent disregard for who I was. I knew that there would be consequences, that my family would be upset. But I was prepared. In fact, I had expected them to be angry, to feel hurt, to blame me for ruining the family's sense of unity. But I was tired of always being the one who was expected to sacrifice. I was tired of always being the one who was overlooked. As the wedding approached, the tension in our family became palpable. I received a flurry of messages from my siblings, asking why they hadn't received invitations. At first, I ignored them, unwilling to engage with their demands. But as the questions continued to flood in, I knew it was time to respond. It started with a message from Olivia in the family group chat. She asked if there was an issue with the mail. I didn't respond immediately. I was still deciding how to approach this. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a quick reply, as if their questions were more important than the decisions I had made for myself. The next day, my mom, Debbie, called. As soon as I answered, she didn't waste any time with pleasantries. She jumped straight into the confrontation, asking why I hadn't invited my siblings. Her voice was laced with anger and confusion, as if I had done something wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, and I told her exactly what had been on my mind for years. They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom, I said, my voice steady but firm. So, I don't think it's fair to invite them to mine. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. I could feel her struggling to process my words, to understand my perspective. And then, she exploded. What do you mean? This is ridiculous. Is David behind this? You've always been so sweet. But now you sound like a completely different person. I nearly laughed. It wasn't David's influence, it was mine. This was my decision, my choice. But my mother wouldn't see it that way. She refused to accept that I had come to this conclusion on my own. She wanted to blame him for the choices I had made. Just like she had always blamed someone else when things didn't go her way. It's not about him, Mom, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. This is my decision. They never made me feel important enough to be included in their weddings. So I don't see why they should be at mine. Her reaction was immediate and furious. She accused me of being selfish, of being childish, of taking things too personally. But I had long since stopped caring about what she thought. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of liberation in my choice. I wasn't going to be manipulated into inviting people who had never cared to include me in their lives when it mattered most. My mother hung up on me, as she always did when things didn't go her way. The silence on the other end of the phone felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had finally said what needed to be said. And for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. But I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. There was more to come. And I was ready for it. The days after my decision were filled with a tense, uncomfortable silence. I knew my family wouldn't let this go easily. They had never understood the depth of my feelings. And they certainly didn't understand why I was making this choice. They always saw me as the obedient one. The one who would just accept things as they were. No questions asked. But this time, I wasn't going to be that person anymore. This time, I was going to stand up for myself. The next few days were filled with messages and phone calls from my siblings. It started with a dramatic message from Ethan, who seemed genuinely shocked that he hadn't received an invitation. Mariana, he wrote, I know you must be hurt from not being invited to my wedding. But you were just a child back then. It wasn't personal. I thought you would have gotten over it by now. I had to hold back my frustration as I read the message. How could he say that? He seemed to completely ignore the fact that it wasn't just his wedding where I was left out. He and the others had all made me feel invisible, as though I didn't matter at all. He seemed to think that because I was a child at the time. My hurt didn't count, but it did, and it still did. I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. It's not about getting over it, Ethan. It's about what's fair. If I wasn't important enough to be at your wedding, why should you be at mine? His response came quickly, and it only made me angrier. He called me a spoiled brat, and said that family should always come before resentment. How could he say that? The very family he was talking about had never cared enough to include me in their special moments. Where was the family closeness when I was begging to be a part of their weddings? Where was the support and understanding? As if the messages from my siblings weren't enough, my parents decided to step in. They came over one evening, unannounced, with the intention of convincing me to change my mind. They were concerned about what people would think, about how it would reflect on the family. As soon as they walked into my house, I could see the disapproval on their faces. My mother, in particular, was livid. What will people think of us? Mariana, she said, her voice laced with outrage. What kind of person doesn't invite their own siblings to their wedding? This is unacceptable. I tried to explain again. But my father interrupted. This is childish and selfish, he said, shaking his head. You're making a huge mistake. That's when I lost it. For years, I had been the one to keep the peace. The one to go along with whatever they said. But not this time. Not anymore. Childish and selfish? I snapped. I was a child when I begged to go to their weddings. And everyone called me dramatic. Now, as an adult, I'm expected to forget all of that and invite them to mine? No, I won't do it. If they didn't make me feel important enough to be at their weddings, why should I care about theirs now? There was a heavy silence in the room after I said that. My mom looked like she might faint. And my dad turned bright red with anger. Without another word, they stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind them. The next few days were filled with messages, calls, and attempts to make me feel guilty. My siblings tried to guilt trip me, telling me I was ruining the family. Olivia sent a message saying that my nephews were excited about the wedding and that it would be cruel to exclude them. But I refused to engage. I had made my decision. And I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. On my wedding day, I felt a huge sense of relief. It was everything I had dreamed of, light, full of love, and surrounded by people who truly cared about me. As I danced with David, I thought about how for the first time in my life, I had control over my own happiness. I wasn't trying to please anyone else. And that felt like the most liberating thing in the world. Little did I know, this wouldn't be the end of it. The fallout from my decision continued. And as expected, my family wasn't going to let me walk away that easily. But at that moment, all I cared about was the love I had found with David, and the life we were building together. Everything else seemed irrelevant now. As time passed, the tension with my family didn't subside. They continued to criticize me, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But I no longer felt the weight of their words. I had made peace with my decision. And that peace was worth more than any apology or guilt trip they could send my way. My life with David was everything I had longed for, full of love, respect, and understanding. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny, free from the toxic cycles of my past. When I found out I was pregnant, it was one of the happiest moments of my life. I could feel the love growing inside of me, and I knew I was going to protect my child from the pain and manipulation I had endured. I made a promise to myself and to my baby. They would grow up surrounded by people who genuinely cared for them. Not people who used love as a tool for control. Despite the continued attempts from my family to force their way back into my life, I remained firm. My child would not experience the emotional games I had been subjected to. I didn't need to justify my decision to anyone. My family could keep blaming me. But I was finally living a life based on my own choices and the love that David and I shared. So, I closed the door to that chapter of my life. And as I look forward to the future, I know it was the right decision. I can breathe easier now, knowing that I'm raising my child in a home filled with genuine love and respect. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when it matters. Thank you for following my story. If you want to hear more life lessons and inspiring stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for new videos.